Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning. I have 9 o'clock. Thank you for joining us for our newest webinar edition of FieldView Focus. Follow us on Twitter with the hashtag FieldView Focus for webinar news and helpful videos on all things FieldView. Webinar recordings can be found on the Climate Corporation's YouTube channel. Today's session, Put Your Data to Work, is focused on making sure that you are ready to look at your data with FieldView and use this data to help you make input decisions on your farm. Our presenters today are going to highlight resources available to help you get started with FieldView if you are new, and we'll walk you through a couple examples of how farmers are using FieldView on their farms. I'm Mindy McDermott, your host today. I will be handling the questions and the controls for today's webinar. There are a couple ways to ask questions: the Q&A box and the chat. If you do not see the Q&A in the lower right of your screen, use the controls found on the bottom center to open the Q&A. Additionally, the chat is found in the bottom in these same controls in the bottom center or lower right. Be sure to ask any questions that you may have. We will take time today to get your questions answered. Our headliners for today's webinar are Ben Schroeder and Jake Prather. Ben and Jake have a wealth of in-field knowledge and lots of experience working with farmers to help them collect data with FieldView. Ben is going to get us started this morning by taking a brief look in the mirror at harvest. Then we're going to get right to our data editing tools and show you how to fix any data collection errors that might have taken place during your harvest or planting seasons. Ben will then introduce Trevor, a climate activation specialist, and cover the many different services our network of activation specialists can provide to you. Ben and Jake will then share an example from farmers that they have heard from on how they are using FieldView to make decisions on their farms. We will then close out the webinar answering questions that you posed to our panelists. Let's get started.
All right, Mindy, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for having me this morning. We're going to start out with a brief harvest review from this past fall. I think this slide gives us a good scale of what everything that FieldView Cab does across the whole U.S. Numbers, a few metrics that we'll talk about here. FieldView Cab had a very good fall because of a great deal of effort by our people behind the scenes. A crash-free rate of 99%. Very few problems with crashing in the field when our customers needed it the most. A total of 113,000 hours of data streamed in one single day, in our peak day of harvest this year. To put that in perspective, if a combine runs 12 hours a day, that was 9,400 combines running all in a single day. And still, we achieved a 99% crash-free rate. I think when you put it in that perspective, it really calls into what we were able to accomplish here at Climate FieldView. On the occasions when the customer does have to call into our help desk this fall, our average wait time was 2 minutes and 1 second.
Thank you, Ben. Those are some great metrics, and we really do appreciate our support team and all that they do to get farmers problem solved and get them back collecting data. Now let's turn our focus to Jake, and he's going to talk to us about some editing tools that we have within FieldView.
Good morning, everybody. What I'm going to talk about is data quality and why it matters. This is one of the reasons why a lot of you guys are here this morning. And so just want to talk about the data that you make versus the data that you see. So what's the value in the data that you put into Climate FieldView and what you see from there. And so I want to show you a quick example. This will tee up all the other grower examples that we talk about, as well as allow Ben to introduce Trevor as well. So hybrid naming is one of the most common areas that we see questions on, as well as issues with when we get to harvest and we have questions. So as you can see on this example, we have two hybrid names at the top that are named differently within Climate FieldView, but they're obviously the same hybrid. Same thing for the bottom three. Same exact hybrid when you look closely, but three different naming conventions And we're going to talk about why that's important to get that as one name. So here's another example of the before, where you see that 3 different hybrids, 3 different yields, in fact. So when we're looking at that and trying to analyze and build a story of what's going on with that operation, which gives us the information all in one spot, but does it really help us build that story and start to decipher the decisions made versus the decisions that we see? Here is the before picture. Here's the after picture. So we condensed all 3 of those into one hybrid name. And now we can see all of that yield aggregated into one specific hybrid name. So this is what we want to see. This is what I think everybody on the call would love to see within their operation, see a clear, concise message and understanding of what is going on in your operation. One of the great things that Climate has is we have the ability to fix your data. This is a grower-facing tool, something that everybody on the phone can do. But within climate.com, if you go up to the settings tab in the far right next to log out, we have a tab called Fix Data. This gives you a view of all the information within FieldView, from planting data to harvest data. You can also look at previous years. So it's not just held to 2020. You can also look back at 2019, 2018, as far back as you would like to see, depending on how much data you have in Climate FieldView. For this example, Ben looked at the planting files and said, I need to fix the hybrid names. When we look at that, what can we do? What can we do and what can't we do? So one thing that we have the ability to do within FieldView is we can edit the crop for a specific field. Let's say you went in and planted soybeans instead of corn. You can go in there and edit that data. Let's say you went in and you planted a pass with the wrong crop, merely because you went in and you were planting soybeans. You made a switch. You wanted to switch over to corn really quick. So you made that switch, but you forgot to make it in the monitor. This allows you to go in, make that change pretty quickly. But the example that I showed was actually in reference to hybrids. So you can also change your hybrid name. So one thing that we've added recently is, as you can see, you see the field names on the left-hand side there. We can see the crop, see what date that planting data was generated, but then on the far right, you can see the hybrids. So for a lot of these fields, there's multiple hybrids in the same field, but the ones that are highlighted, the orange, red color, those are ones that Ben would have gone in the previous example and decided, hey, I want to change that. So we highlight unknown hybrids, or we highlight a hybrid that maybe our system doesn't recognize, or it's not part of our database of hybrid names. So if you click on one of those, it pops up a window that shows some alternatives or things that you can do with those hybrid names. A great tool, a great add. You can also manually select a field and change a hybrid name to something else on your own. Just another great way that we can change data. So the next question is, this is a grower-facing tool, but we also have a team of climate activation specialists that Ben will introduce, and a lot of great resources out in the field, because I know a lot of you guys on the call, guys and gals on the call, may have questions on, hey, I know that this is in front of me, but I'm not sure exactly how to do this. We have a lot of great resources, and I'm going to turn it over to Ben to discuss those and showcase how we can use those.
Hey, Jake and Ben, before we switch up presenters here, let's take at least one question from our audience. The first question that's come in is, if I build a manually generated map for, per se, manure, and I accidentally enter the wrong date, how do I fix or edit the date for a manually generated map?
Great question. Unfortunately, to fix and edit the date for a manually generated map, because that's one of the things that we don't allow editability within the Fix It tool, just because with machine generated data, that usually is set in stone. The best way to do that would be to delete that data layer and start with a fresh slate, which is possible. You have the ability to, within that fix-it tool, if Ben wants to go back one slide. At the top, you can see edit, which is what we were talking about, but you can also see the delete. You can delete an entire data layer within FieldView. So for that specific field in question, you can delete that data layer and then redo the manual map creation with the corrected date that you would like to see.
That's good, Jacob. Thank you. The question comes up now that I have this data, good data and clean data, the fixes Jacob brought up there. How do I use climate to aid in my farming decisions? Seed and chemical decisions. And Jacob and I are going to go through a couple examples here of my example is a block planted. Excuse me. My example is the example of a grower who planted a block of 4 different soybean varieties in a field. We're going to use first yield analysis. I'll point out that you can do yield analysis on a phone or iPad. It'll look a little bit different on your phone than what you're seeing on the screen here because I am using an iPad, but all the functionality is the same. We're going to start this with yield analysis. My example field is a 2017 soybean field, so we'll go down to that. And this looks very familiar. This looks very familiar to anybody who has used yield analysis very much. All of my 2017 soybean fields are displayed here. We're going to go into our soybean comparison field. And what here is the block planting that I mentioned. So we have 120 acres planted to 4 different soybean varieties, one being Asgrow 008X7, and then 3 other varieties as well. So as you can see here, across the whole field, there was basically a three-way tie between 008X7, variety B, and variety A. That tells you the same as just a printed out yield map will tell you. There are a lot of gaps there. Was a certain variety planted in more acres of a certain soil type? Soil type variability can obviously impact performance of a variety in a field. And if a certain variety landed on more acres of a good soil type, that'll favor that variety very much. And we need to be able to see through that. And we do that by looking at the field first, not by varieties, but by soils. We click on soils up at the very top. In this case, we see the field has 3 different soil types. And I think we can really view this as a 3 individual plots within that field. If you have 3 soil types, you really do have 3 test plots across that. And we're going to look at each one of these test plots, each one of these soil types. So Hamlet, Hamerly, Tonka complex, click the arrow on the far right. And we see our 4 soybean varieties right here. In this case, Asgrow 008X7 was the best variety, won by 2 bushels over variety B and 5 bushels over variety A. A 2 bushel win, doesn't seem like a lot for sure, but it becomes significant when you start zooming in. This is a 2 bushel advantage in what looks to be 26 acres of the exact same soil type. If we're seeing this across several fields, multiple soil types, the consistent wins by certain varieties, even if they are small wins, can show us that really is the better variety. Barn, Hamlet, Tonka complex. So all 3 varieties did cross this soil type as well. All 4 varieties crossed the soil type as well. And you see here, there's a three-way tie at the top. Barnes, Spey, Loam, a 1 bushel win for 888X7. So in this example, one variety won 2 of the 3 soil types and tied on the 3rd. That lets us really start zooming in on the performance of what I'm planting. And a note that you may have plots, these trials and plots out in your field right now. It's changing hybrids of varieties as you're planting in the spring. Maybe put a block in on purpose for something like this. Do that. Gather the data up with FieldView. Clean the data up. Confirm that it's clean, as Jacob showed. And then you can be doing this very easily and really anytime. You can do this on your phone, sitting in line at the elevator. You can be running through this. So we can zoom in further. We're going to go to FieldView Cab and look at some field region reports. This is that same soybean field. We see our 4 soybean varieties here. Beforehand, I drew some field region reports, some permanent field region reports that gathered up planter or drill passes. You see here that we have 2 2 field region reports that straddle variety changes. In this case, variety changes from 88X7 to the variety on each side. You see 88X7 in this strip, in this region report, beat variety A by 2.5 bushels. Comparing to variety B here, recall that variety B was the most competitive with 88X7 when we were looking at yield analysis. This side-by-side, a true side-by-side field region report shows a 3 bushel win. So even though the wins were narrow, looking at it across several different tests within the same field, all planted at the same time, that narrow win can make you pretty confident that the winning variety, Asgrow 88X7 in this case, really is the better variety. Across that field, the 4 varieties planted in that field, it really is the better variety. Good example there. And I think Jacob has another example to show us.
So Ben had a great example of you've gotten your data in, the question is, decisions made versus decisions seen. So, he showed 2 prime examples of they were able to see those small wins in comparison to multiple products to make the best decision on their farm. So what I'm going to show is an example of some crop protection. So, we can bring in not only just planting data and harvest data, but as one of the questions came in, we can also bring in application data. So here's a great example of a soybean field where the grower actually did a fungicide trial. So if I go up here, I can actually view, if I go to in season, I can see all the applications that this grower has done. But if I click on fungicide application and the rate, I can actually see where within that field, there were areas where they left check strips of unsprayed fungicide. So if I go ahead and click on the region that I created, I can see where they didn't apply fungicide. And this is a great tool to dive deeper, like Ben discussed, to understand, because when you're going through the field and you're seeing the yield on the yield monitor, you can kind of get a sense for how that field is doing. Maybe you put some multiple products, or maybe you did a trial similar to this. But really, at the end of the day, the question is, did this do what I need it to do? And does it pay for my operation? So for the no fungicide area, the yield was 57.8 bushels. remember that number because I'm going to click out, because currently we don't have the ability to see multiple regions in the same report. But we do have the ability to click on different regions and really diagnose. So I also created another field region report prior to this where the fungicide was applied. That yielded 61.1 bushel per the acre. So for this instance, and in communication with the grower, that was 3.3 bushel advantage for the fungicide application. For him, he was satisfied with that from a stance of it allowed him to make decisions moving forward for his operation in regards to fungicide application. And I think that's the key, is understanding what information you have, how do you utilize this information, and really utilizing your own farming and field information to help make better decisions. And really dive in, because at the end of the day, without having these field regions created, would he have been able to see that yield difference just by looking at the combine monitor alone or scale tickets? So a great example showcasing the value of using field region reports. And the way I did this, because we got this question a couple days ago, is I actually went in, clicked on the more, you can see application summary, but I can also create a field region. And within the CAB app, I use select pass. And what I did is I actually selected the pass of the applicator for that field. And so what this allows us to do is select the application passes. You can also select planting passes or harvest passes if you were viewing that map layer. So a great tool to help you dive deeper into your own information, to see those, to help you make those decisions that you see. So that's my example. And with that, I think we'll open it up to some more questions.
We do have several questions that have come in. So thank you all for your great questions. And I'm just going to direct them to the person I think can best handle them. And then if Ben or Jake, either one of you want to jump in and add, well, Trevor, you too, if there are additional things that you can add to answers, that would be much appreciated. So first off, the first question that we had come in is, when is the Ag Leader monitor in a John Deere combine going to be able to use the FieldView Drive spring data? So reach out to the product team, but Jake and Ben, if one of you wants to jump in and answer that.
I'll take that. So I don't remember the exact number that we say. It's something along 85%. 85% of the machinery made in the last 10 years is compatible with FieldView Drive. We're constantly working to add the other 15%. Most recently, an example would have been Outback. Some Outback controllers came on. Doesn't do you any good when you're a part of that 15%. For example, running Ag Leader in a John Deere. Sort of thing is always coming for sure. We do the major upgrade to FieldView CAD usually twice a year, and there's more stuff that comes on to compatibility every time. Unfortunately, the answer to your question about Ag Leader compatibility, when will it come compatible? I don't have a good answer for that. The answer is definitely not never. We will have that compatibility. When will we have it? It sounds as though you're running this in a combine. Looks that way. When will we have it? Hopefully by harvest of next year. And unfortunately, I don't have a better answer than that for you right now.
No, I think that's perfect, Ben. And I'll just add, since I've been, with Climate for the last 4 years, this question comes up every harvest, and there's definitely those key hitters with compatibility. And like Ben said, we have such a strong compatibility already. The other equipment that we're still continuing to work with those machinery companies and those partners to ensure that we can get to that 100% compatibility within our platform. And I think it's just to say that's why we've put a heavy emphasis and built a strong climate activation specialist team with Trevor and other members across our footprint to help ensure that having in-cab connectivity is just one piece of Climate FieldView, but we do have the accessibility, especially with an ag leader combine, to bring in that data, and everything that we showed you guys today, you have the ability to do. We just may not be able to bring that data in the cab, but we can bring that data into one place for you. So just one thing to point out.
Excellent. I also will add that it has been a pretty big undertaking. Ag leader is a bit complex, is what the product team is telling us. But they also say that what can you do to help? Talk with your ag leader dealers, reps, corporate partners. Let them know that you want connectivity between ag leader and FieldView, and if both companies are cooperating with that, will help make it possible. So that's something that you can do locally. A follow-up with that is, what about ag leader compatibility with planting data? Jake, and then you have anything to add to that?
Leader compatibility with planting data, the answer would be the same. As of right now, we can't stream. Point out something I should have mentioned in the first question, that almost without exception, when you are not compatible to stream live with FieldView Drive, our data inbox works. Our data inbox, think of it as the old manual way. Move the data with a thumb drive or a flash card from that box in the cab to your computer and then import it into your account. We can ingest all kinds of data that way. And our climate activation specialists like Trevor spend a lot of time doing that. We have an initiative after every season where we reach out to growers who might have data that needs to be inboxed and work with those. Trevor talked about going out to growers, growers' farms, and working with them on that. Trevor is very happy to do that. So in the case of your Trimbles that are not compatible with FieldView Drive, the data inbox option is always there.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And thank you for the questions. More questions here coming in. So this is fabulous. One more question, or another question that has come in is, what about viewing cotton harvest data on climate.com? Currently it reads bushels per acre on yield maps, and folks would like it to read lint per acre or seeds per acre.
I'll take that one. That was a question. That's not a question we get from customers in Minnesota, but I do recall from a conference call from one of my southern counterparts. We don't have that now. That sounds to me like it's a bit of maybe a glitch with the app. We will have that by harvest. You don't harvest cotton by the bushel. You harvest it by the pound, and that's a fix. That's a simple fix that we can make and need to make.
Yeah, and I will follow that up with the best harvest or best cotton experience with FieldView lies within FieldView Cab app. There is still work, as you have indicated, work to do on our climate.com visibility with cotton. So thank you for that question. Okay, going through more of these questions. Is there a way to analyze repetitive strip trials for something that wasn't recorded in FieldView, such as inline ripping or strip application?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was going to say there's actually two ways to do it. One is FieldView Cab does work with tillage. We talk about a lot because it's that tillage pass isn't as critical as many of so many of the other layers you have. But if your tractor and GPS are compatible with FieldView Drive, you can log that tillage pass. It would show up as a layer in FieldView Cab. If you're not compatible, if your tillage tractor is not compatible with FieldView Cab, the extra iPad and FieldView Drive to put in the tillage tractor. Very easy to drop a pin at the border. You know, that last pass on front and back, drop a pin in your FieldView and mark it as such. Tillage on the west side, tillage on the east side. Those pins will stay, and then you can draw a field region report based off of that. What you would do there is draw two specific field region reports for tilled or ripped versus unripped and compare the yields in there. That's a simpler one that you can do without GPS in the cab. If you're doing it that way, you can drop pins with your smartphone, your iPhone or Android phone. So the person in the tractor, again, will just grab their phone, make sure they're logged into your FieldView account, and drop those pins.
Perfect. Anything that you want to add, Jake, or if either one of you wants to show your screen and just demo that, we can do that.
Yeah, I can show. So here's the example that I've got, and I think what Ben was getting at is basically, from my experience, is as long as you have your planting data and harvest data in there, that gives us the ability to create a field region report and analyze data. So getting your tillage map into FieldView is a great way to know, hey, I did this trial with strip versus vertical or strip versus conventional, to kind of see. And I think that's where the question is going is, hey, I went in and I did half the field like this and half the field a different way. But if I pull up my so if I go and I look at my harvest map and I look at my yield, the one nice thing that the Cab app allows you to do, and you can draw a field region report in the Black and Gold app or other Climate FieldView app as well. But if I go, and this is how I created these field region reports, but essentially I can select a pass. So I can select a planting pass, a harvest pass, a sprayer application pass, any pass that's done that's done by a piece of machinery, I can select those passes. So if I click on that pass, I can then create a region just like I did using the passes of the equipment. And that allows us to analyze information. So let's say that you didn't put your tillage map into Climate FieldView, you can bring in your, with your harvest passes, you can create a field region report. And of course, there it goes. But this is how I created those, and this is how Ben created his as well. Just to give you guys a little bit of a view of how we went through that.
So thanks, Jake and Ben. If they didn't record it at all, what's your guidance on helping folks have that data into FieldView, or can they? Is it something that they could do with adding an activity through a manual map layer, or is that something that they maybe need to look at next year and make sure that they capture their tillage passes? Yeah,
so I'll just show this really quick. But let's say you strip tilled your entire field. One of the things that Climate FieldView we can do is if I go to settings and data, you can actually add activities. And if I go to a field, you can select your equipment. So if you select a piece of tillage equipment, it's going to create a tillage map. If you select a planting planter or a planter, it'll help you create a planter map. If you select a combine, you can actually create a manually generated yield map utilizing field health imagery. I've had this come up quite often where, you had a mishap with your combine. Maybe you didn't have the compatibility with GPS, or you had a loaner for a few days, whatever that may be. You can manually generate a map based on field health imagery. So if you have the entire boundary of a field, you can generate a manual map to identify, hey, this field I strip tilled, or this field I did conventional, this field was vertical tillage, whatever that may be. Now, if you're doing trials within a field where it's multiple passes, this add activity, this manual activity creation does not allow you to do that. My best suggestion would be to either plug your drive into a compatible tractor that has GPS, and you can put an incompatible rate controller, put a tillage implement behind you, and you can map by pass within that tractor cab. Or if you're really highly analytical and you really want to dive into this more, we do have the kit within FieldView that allows you to put a GPS unit on an incompatible tractor. We have a harness that allows you to connect the drive, and then you can map any implement behind yourself, static rate, static population, or static pass, but it allows you to map your tillage. Or, maybe you don't have a compatible soybean planter. It allows you to map your varieties for soybeans if you're doing trials in soybeans as well. So that's what my suggestion would be, is either look at this manual map creation for an entire field, or if you're doing a lot of trials with tillage or other things that maybe you don't have a compatible piece of equipment, the GPS kit that we've got on Knowledge Center, and Mindy will talk about that before we're through today, but that gives a great access to be able to analyze and generate more maps than just your planting and harvest.
Absolutely. And Jake, just to follow up or emphasize this point, if they're doing strip tillage or ripping certain sections of the field and they're not doing all areas of the field, the best way for them to map that tillage layer is by using the incompatible rate controller, selecting tillage in the cab app, and then stopping and starting in areas where they are and are not doing that ripping. Correct.
And going back, as long as they have planting and harvest data and they have an idea of where they did that, they can drop pins. You can even draw a field region report after planting before you harvest and indicate that and save that field region as a tillage pass. And that can be your season-long field region report that stays stationary. And that way which area of the field you did that pass on.
Yeah, perfect. And I am placing something in the questions and the answers that shows how to make tillage passes with FieldView Cab app.
Wonderful.
We have several questions related to tillage, so that's great. Okay, another one that we have is, let me find it here. We have lots of questions. This is fabulous. Is there a way to analyze, that's the same question. How close are you being able to show multiple region reports in a season summary report?
Oh, great question. I get this a lot because, as I pull this up, the commonality is I can look at these individually, but I can't pull them up together. I know that we've brought this up to product managers. I'm not exactly sure. Mindy, you may have a better line of sight, or Ben may know if that's on the pipeline.
It's in the pipeline. I don't know the time frame for it. We want to do it right for sure. I mean, there's more and more data coming in whatever functionality we add. We want that to be something that works as our customers add more and more data going forward. Time frame, I'm not sure.
Perfect. That is the same information that I have. Another question, what is the status of data integration with third parties such as Ag World? And if you guys don't have information about this, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I have gotten back from our partners team is that Ag World is next on the list of partners for integrating, and it is a high priority on the climate side. So I don't have a timeline per se, but I do know that our teams are working on that integration. Perfect, thank you. All right, we're going to keep going through these questions. This one has had a couple questions related to deleting an entire field in Fix-It Tool, or how can you delete an entire field? And feel free, Jake, if you want to pull up your screen to show this. But the example is we helped the neighbor, and our FieldView drive recorded those passes and that activity, and he does not use or need the data. We would like to remove it from our data.
So deleting a field, so here's the Fix-It tool. Deleting data, so deleting a data layer can be done in the Fix-It tool. So if you have planting data, you want to keep the boundary, but you want to delete the planting or harvest data, you can select the field and select delete. But I think what they're actually asking is, how do I remove a field from my account because we no longer farm it? I don't want to think about it, and it's not here. And I believe if you go to climate.com, you can click on your fields, and then at the top there is the edit button. And then if you select a specific field, you can actually select delete. And so that's one of the places that you can do it. If you have trouble doing that, please let us know, reach out. We're more than happy to assist you in doing that. But climate.com is one place, and that's where a lot of your editing can be done.
Excellent. To follow up with that, Jake, what about archiving? If they don't want to see the field, what is your recommendation on being able to archive that data instead of deleting it in case it needs to be reinstated?
Yes, great question. To my knowledge, right now, I know we've had numerous requests for this, and Mindy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but right now there's no good way within Climate FieldView for us to archive. A lot of times, the question comes up of, hey, I'm not farming this year. I hope to maybe get it back in the future, so I don't want to delete it. But how do I hide it, or how do I do that? Right now, there's not a good way for us to do that. Mindy, I'm correct in saying that, right?
Yeah, yes, that's right. Within FieldView, we don't have an archive area. So my best advice is getting it on a thumb drive or in a monitor in another. Yeah.
So I've had growers export their data from that field, put it on a thumb drive, and then bring it, save it, and then delete it from Climate FieldView. Or another way, which is not a simple way to do it, is I've had growers put a Y or something at the beginning of the field name. That way it always shows up at the bottom of your list. Because I think that's the most frustrating thing is, especially if it's your first field, let's say it's 1323, it's always going to show up at the top, and it's frustrating. You see it constantly. It's a constant reminder, how do I bump it down? So every situation in that scenario is a little bit different. I would suggest that you reach out to your climate representative or your dealer, whoever your climate business partner is that you work closely with. If you don't have one, feel free to reach out. But we can advise on some of the best practices with those things, because like Ben mentioned, and even Mindy, we're continuing to bring out new features within the platform, but a lot of us have been around this a long time to know the tips and tricks and ways to at the end of the day, it's building a good experience for you, and that's what we're here to do.
Perfect. Okay, Jake, while you have your FieldView climate.com visible, there are some fix-it data questions. So we're going to try to clump those together and address those. So first one is, can we use the fix-it data to fix harvest errors as well? So the example is a combine pulled into a soybean field. His iPad was set as wheat, and they combined one pass. Then they realized the iPad had not changed. Can that path be changed from wheat data to soybean data, and how is that best handled?
That's a great question, and yes, it can be. So whenever you have a field that has multiple crops for harvest data, right now you see that I've got for 2024 fields, and you can see that soybeans, they're all soybeans. So let's say, for example, on this soy fungicide example, that there was a pass of corn. That'll show up as a line item, a separate line item, and it'll show up as a separate opportunity for you to select it. So switching crops for harvest data is actually very simple. All I do is I select that line item, and I click edit. Original crop is soybeans, and I go and I select my new crop. I get this. The other thing that shows up quite often is we'll get an applicator, a grower or somebody that was in the cab of the tractor, and instead of selecting corn, they select corn, sweet corn, right? So it's changing everything to be one crop. So that's a very simple edit, and I won't do it because I don't want to mess up this data. But that's where you would go in order to fix harvest files.
And Jake, what if it's just one pass, and then they realized it after that pass and they switched the crop? How's that going to be visible, and then how do they fix that?
Yeah,
Is it going to be,
let me see if...
Since they select a different crop, will it show up as a different map, or will it just throw one pass in a map? And it's different. What's the...
It shows up as a different line item, and I'm looking to see if I've got some historic data that has that.
And then as they fix that crop, well, then they have to reprocess to pull those two fields back together.
No, they won't have to reprocess. So all it's doing is changing the attribute for that one pass. So, for example, I've got the same field here, field 17. And it's the same crop, but I can go in, the sources, it's two different sources, so 2020 and upload. So what would show up here for that specific example is it would show up as corn or cotton here. And then the next line item, if you can see my cursor, would be wheat. So all you would do is select the one that is wrong and then edit that one. I think that answers the question, Mindy.
Perfect. Okay. And we have some more questions related to fix-it data here. There is, I have small areas that along field boundaries that are recorded in the wrong crop, i.e. corn when it should have been beans. Can they delete this information? Very similar to what you just explained here.
Yeah. But is that situation, is the data outside the boundary, Mindy? I don't have the question in front of me.
It's not say if it was outside. So it says I have small areas that along field boundaries that recorded in the wrong crop. So it should have been, it recorded corn when it should have been beans. So maybe,
similar, the same fix as this.
Okay, and then the other one is, can yield data be smoothed out because of combine speed changes?
Great question. When we're looking at, so when we're reading the data from the combine, so if you're connected with the cab of the combine, we're getting the data from that piece of machinery. So data out is only as good as data in, right? And we get this question a lot. Our limitation is based upon the piece of machinery that the data is being collected on. So we always recommend, good calibrations. A lot of combine monitors allow for low flow, high flow, depending on your speed change or depending on how many rows you're taking within that combine head. Calibrating your combine is the first step to make sure that you have accurate data. Smoothing out the data, that's an interesting question. I haven't had that one yet. But my answer would be that currently we wouldn't be able to smooth out the starting lines and finishings at the beginning and end of a pass. And I may lean on Ben to see if he's had any instances with that, but to my knowledge, the only way would be to do the entire field or to ensure that the combine is calibrated.
That's right, Jacob. I'm not aware of any way to smooth data after the fact. You can update your pounds or bushels after the fact. If you're logging all the bushels come off that field with your grain cart or elevator tickets, you can update that. Precision is addictive, right? It dialed in with my exact pounds off the field. It'll recalculate that whole map. The higher yielding parts will still be the higher yielding parts, and lower yielding parts will still be the lower yielding parts, but it'll correct all of those parts off of the total bushels. If you're running multiple machines in the field, similarly, you can smooth, I guess you'd call it smoothing, between those two machines. You were able to do that. But as far as beyond that, we're not capable of doing that.
Perfect. Okay, folks, we still have more questions to answer, and we will stay on the line to answer those questions, but we realize that you probably have other things that you may want to go and take care of, but you can certainly stay on the line. We are recording this. Jake, if you'll go to the presentation, perfect. I'll just highlight Knowledge Center. So we do have resources available, and I've shown several of them to help us answer your questions today that you can access by going to support.climate.com. The best experience is utilizing the search button. So if you wanted to know, for example, what we talked about today, how to map a tillage path, type in tillage, and that article that I shared in the questions and answer box would show up, how to map tillage passes with FieldView. So you utilize that. You can also utilize our videos. We have content arranged in categories, and we also have seasonally relevant documents and videos on the site. We are recording this webinar, and if you'll go to the next slide, the recording is going to be available on the Climate Corporation YouTube channel. You can see here that we have 5 webinars up already from this past year. You can go back and view those. So if there's something that you want to rewind and go back and listen to, look for that recording to be up later this week. We do have another session of this webinar on Thursday morning at 7 a.m. if you want to tune in then as well. But we are going to stay on the line and answer questions, and those questions will be recorded with that, recorded on that YouTube. So thank you very much for joining us, but we understand if you have to jump off, but we are going to stay on and answer more questions. So with that, other questions that are coming up. So can you build a manual yield map from satellite imagery for, say, cotton or corn silage that are not mapping yield at harvest to make, the map represent what a scouting image looks like?
That's a good one. I don't believe so. Jacob, would you want to hop over to FieldView Cab and run through a demo, see what all are up?
I'm pulling it up. I know we can do corn and soybeans. And I apologize, I am not as familiar.
And I'm going to lump this question in with the same one as maybe you're pulling that up, Jake. So let's say you want to create a yield map for a crop that you are harvesting that you don't have a yield monitor for. The example here is given is peanuts. So will you be able to do that with satellite imagery? So if the total pounds harvested for the field. So the same functionality that they're talking about here, but we know that we can do it with corn and soy. I'm not sure if we can do it with silage or peanuts, but those are great questions that we can take back to our product team to see if they are able to make adjustments to make that happen.
I'll jump in, Mindy. I was playing on my can do silage. You can do silage, a manual map, and it works just like a harvest map. You put in your total tons in crop moisture, and then choose the satellite image from the summer that you want to use, and it'll build you a map. I did not try the other crops.
I'm trying that.
Our presenters are teaching us, our participants are teaching the presenters something, and now they're wanting to know sorghum too. So I passed the ball to Ben. Do I need to pass it back to Jacob?
No, you're good.
Okay. Ben, if you want to show your iPad to show this for folks, it sounds like we've got several interested in other crops.
Yeah. Before we get to that, I saw one of the questions in the chat about a Trimble 1000 controller on a Case-IH sprayer. It looks as though the other question to ask is the actual application rate controller. I didn't see that question in the chat, so we want to know, know which rate controller to use. I grabbed the Trimble in there, and also GPS. I grabbed what looks to be a common Trimble GPS. In this case, not compatible. Still do the data inbox. To know exactly for sure, we'd need to know the application rate controller in the GPS. I'll call out also this compatibility checker that I'm on. That link is available on climate.com. So, Mindy, what was the question again? Sorry.
Okay, so I'll have to find it here. You took a little sidetrack on me.
Yeah.
So you're showing the ability to map a yield map using imagery in other crops.
Sure. So on FieldView cab, we go into settings, and then data. Click on data. On the far top right, we want to add activity. So it's going to ask us some details as we go forward. First off, we want to select the field that we're on. And then any of the machines that we have set up in machinery, you'll see I have some random anything in here. We can add, or we can put a manual map in. We mentioned silage harvest. And so we'll just put one in right now. I'm guessing my tons here, of course. Moisture, I'm guessing at this as well. So our harvest date, our crop, and now we can select which satellite image we want to use. It'd be something during the summer. I would suggest you consult with your seed retailer or technical agronomist for advice on which to choose. Be something during the summer. I'll grab August 2nd here. And
if I can make it.
Yeah.
While this is loading, so one thing, as Ben just showed, we have full view of imagery within our platform, right? So one thing that I always suggest growers when they're creating a manual harvest map is to go through their imagery and look at that prior to doing it and write down that date because as you saw in that example, we don't show the image of the satellite imagery to showcase which one, to ensure that you're selecting the correct image.
I don't recall what field that was. Was that the Benson field I harvested? I don't recall which I put it in. It was a regular yield map, though, silage. So it just takes, you know, the relative health across the field, spots, bad spots, and spreads those tons, in this case, across those fields and builds you a colored yield map for that. Important to get the best satellite image for that, and that's where your seed dealer or agronomist can be a big help. Good question.
We have more questions, Mindy?
Yes, I do. Can you show how you could create and analyze a hybrid comparison plot?
Jake, this is up your alley.
It is. So, and maybe I'll just talk through this, because like the field region reports that we did, so there's two ways. You saw Ben show the example of yield analysis with block planning. You also saw both of us utilize the field region reports. In a perfect world, what I like to see from my agronomists and from our TA organization is, you know, create a field exactly like this, Ben, or similar. You know, if you had multiple entries, you would name those hybrids accordingly. And most of the time when you have a multiple entry plot, you're going to be a little bit more thoughtful in your planting of that and maybe the nomenclature that you use when you're naming. Whenever you do that, it flows into yield analysis based on the hybrid name or the variety name. Now, in certain situations, let's say you had a planter pass with a multiple hybrid entry, but then you also had a trial on top of that with a seed treatment or a fungicide application. That's where the field region report comes in, because you may not have the opportunity to change half the planter. You may not know exactly where that application is going to go. So that's where the field region report comes into play. There's so many ways that you can splice the data without knowing too many details. I don't want to get too off course there, but that's really the drive behind a multiple entry test plot.
I went looking for one of our FTN plot results. So field trial, many of the corn plots we do are full length down the field, usually a split planter. So a 16-row planter planted to 2 corn hybrids that matches up with the corn head on the machine. You know, up to, I mean, as many hybrids as you'd like. Our plots will have 10 or 12 hybrids in them. To Jacob's point, very important to get them named right the first time. Although, so you aren't going into the fix-it tool later to correct those. Lots of hybrids there. It's easy to get them mixed up. Want to get it right the first time. A multi-hybrid plot or more than 2 hybrid plot would look a lot like this field, just with more hybrids down here. And then when you do field region, just drew a quick and dirty freehand. We see how our yields shook out. I'll point out, this is another good example of my prior example with the soybeans. When you zoom into a specific soil type, you start seeing some really good examples and differences here. As a former seed FSR, Jacob and I know if you're setting something like this up, plan ahead. Get your hybrids correct. If you're putting in multiple brands, each one has its own seed treatment name. Get those set up ahead of time in FieldView cab. So when you're in the field planting this plot, you can less time and less chance of getting something wrong.
Yeah, so I would just add to that, Ben, and I think we've got more questions, but I think the biggest thing with plots is planning ahead. Talk to your territory agronomist, talk to your climate representative. The field product specialist team, there's a field product specialist in nearly every state within our footprint, or if you don't have access, our team is well aware of plots and trials and different ways to do it. I think the biggest thing is just to plan ahead and know what you're wanting to accomplish. And I've seen many, many different ways to set things up. And every situation, I talked about the standardized way of doing it across the board, but there may be a situation that you're talking about or you're asking about that may be a little bit more specific, and we can help guide you through that.
Excellent. Okay, Jake, you're right. We do still have more questions. So this one is related to precision planting equipment. So this gentleman says, we are precision users and we use V-Apply. Could you give us some of a timeline when fertilizer data will move automatically into FieldView from precision planting? And then additionally, another question as well is there the capability to map starter application when planting?
I do know that I've had growers in the past years. I know this year we do have the ability to bring in application data from VApply. I think their question is regarding using VApply at the same time as using the data at the same time as planting. And I don't believe we have the ability to do that currently. But I do know that if you're using, let's say, a side dress bar, we do have the ability to bring in that VApply data. I've done that before. That's a short and sweet answer.
All right. So then let's see, there is another one here, a couple more. When is there going to be a one-button action to collate all planting maps or all harvest maps and be able to print or email instead of doing each field individually?
That's a good one.
So I know. Yeah, so I know that our product team, we are continually working on enhancements within our web platform, and I know that we are looking at reporting as one of those enhancements. So more to come on that. I know that it's being looked at, and we're trying to make a better, more seamless integration with reporting as we look into that.
Okay, great. So this one is one that I'm going to take because I have line of sight on this one. So can we expect the iPad functionality to be soon available in the web app? So this example is, I cannot find a way on climate.com to draw field regions, for example. And so you may have noticed that we've added scouting pins recently to the web, and we are currently working on a field region report. It might be a little bit of a late Christmas present, but it is coming fairly soon for the capacity to draw field regions via the web. So happy late Christmas on that one. We will have that coming soon. Then we also have, I have a problem with multiple equipment setups for the same VIN number. It seems to make a new one every time we hook to a new iPad or switch drives. Can you address that?
Was something that was going on, and in fact, I had that problem last fall. The trick. So it is a glitch. It's a known glitch that we're working on. The fix there, unfortunately, is to disconnect all of your drives, delete that machine from every iPad, This is a bit time consuming, unfortunately. Disconnect all of your drives, delete the machine from machine or machines plural from those iPads if you have more than one iPad, and then set up the machine fresh. You set up the machine fresh in one iPad. When that machine is set up, when you cloud sync, it'll push that one new correct machine in there. And at that point, you should be good to go. That's a known issue, and that's being addressed.
Thank you, Ben. That's a great question. Okay. This one says, when we have to replant an entire field, what is the best way to approach that in FieldView CAD with Precision 2020? That when they have done this, their ability to collect data during harvest, the iPad gets pretty confused.
So the entire field is replanted? Is that the question, Mindy?
Yes. How do they get rid of the old one, the first initial planting, so that they can know which data to assign, or which field to assign the data to when they harvest, so that the system.
Correct.
Yeah,
I understand.
Do you want to take it, Ben, or
go for it, Jacob?
No. So replant, if it's done after 14 days of planting, within 14 to 60 days, you can go into the field and plant over what you've already planted. I think the situation they're talking about is they have a total field that they want to just start fresh, right? Using the Fix-It tool, you can go into the Fix-It tool and delete that planting data layer and then go back in and start fresh with a clean slate. I recommend doing it the first way, so that way you have a record of what you did first, because it'll automatically override with our replant configuration within our platform. It'll automatically override the first planting data, and it'll go to the second planting data. But in that situation where you're replanting an entire field, I can understand where you would just say, hey, having that first planting is worthless. I don't want to see it. Using the Fix-It tool, you can delete that planting data layer and plant an entire new one.
Jacob, if I did that, would I want to delete that planting layer before I did the replant, so I never have two planting layers in there? Would that be necessary?
If it's after 14 days, it would not be necessary, but I would recommend, if that's, I don't like doing it that way, but if that's the way that you prefer to do it, I would recommend that before you go back out there to replant an entire field, that you totally disc up or starting over. Yeah. That I would recommend doing that before you go out there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, you guys are doing a great job while we've been putting you on the hot seat here for a while. So I am looking for, I know we have a couple more questions. So I believe this was when one of you were showing your demo, and the question is, can you see singulation and down pressure from this map? So I believe they were looking in the FieldView app, perhaps, and wanting to know if you can see singulation and down pressure. And I will just add that we have added more parity between that map, or between the apps, regarding map layers that come from precision planting. So it used to be only visible in the CAB app, but it is visible now in the main app as well as Android, I believe.
So
the
example of that soybean with an air drill, a big air drill, so there's nothing being logged there. The compatibility is not universal for sure across different brands, be it Precision Planting or John Deere. Some of the other companies, I think Ag Leader has an automated downforce. In the situations that are compatible, John Deere and Ag Leader, for example, It does gather up the downforce layer, and that's what you see right here. I don't know what brand of machine was used in this case, but you see here we do have applied downforce. I believe this right here tells us how much net downforce there is in the unit. So we have that. In the other layer, Mindy, they're asking about
Singulation.
singulation. Yep. So again, if your machine is compatible, it will gather in singulation.
Good question.
Okay. Yeah, these are fabulous questions. Next one is, I do not run climate in our combine because they use my John Deere Operations Center as their data hub. If they import the harvest data from my John Deere to climate, can they still do the analysis that we were showing with field region and yield analysis?
Of course they can. And I actually have a lot of growers. My footprint has a strong presence of my John Deere users that maybe have newer equipment that we can't run the drive on, or for some of those situations, my John Deere does a great job of bringing in their data. And so we do have the access to bring the data into FieldView after the fact if you prefer to utilize that system. And we can, everything that we've shown you from an analysis piece today, you have the ability to do that when you data inbox and bring that data into FieldView.
And I'll add, you can link your My John Deere account to your FieldView account. By doing so, My John Deere pushes that data into the data inbox that can then be moved over to the actual field. A couple of mouse clicks. Once you're linked up, it's a couple of mouse clicks, and it all works very well, very well.
Absolutely, and I will share that in response to that question as well. And the next question is, I would like to have the ability to manage application data in the Fix-It tool. How soon might that be coming?
Great question. So my team gets this quite often because we do a lot of trials with application data. If you do have concerns on needing to fix application data, you can call our support line. They do have access to delete and do some fixing of application data. For one instance, I had a grower that had some issues with his, he has an ag leader Integra and with a Heggie, and he sprayed and he was having some cab app issues with his drive. So we deleted that data layer and we manually imported the map from ag leader. That worked out really well. So our support team can help do that. As far as a timeline, I know that we're constantly being asked to bring that into the Fix-It tool. Not sure when that will happen, but we do have the resources to assist you and talk you through, what would you like to have done with your application data, and walk you through this. Our team can help assist you in doing that.
Excellent. Okay. I added that to the chat to show how to sync. The next question, how close are you in having multiple regions on the same PDF report?
I think I know that question came up, and I've already talked about it, Mindy, but
You did that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Can you run FieldView Cab with a Trimble SM1000 in a case IH sprayer?
That was the example that I brought up at the beginning, Mindy. Two other questions that need to be.
No, that was another one. That was a different question.
Okay.
At least maybe it's in here twice then, because that one was in the chat. I believe that you.
The compatibility checker online, just bear with me here. The compatibility checker online example that I showed is where you would look So this was the first question, Case IH sprayer. I just grabbed a random late model Case IH sprayer, Trimble FM 1000. Was there a note, Mindy, about the application rate controller, which is basically the black box on the side of the machine that translates? Was there a note about that, and also GPS?
I do not have those details.
I guessed some Trimble options, and I don't see. I think the big hangup is the application rate controller there. I don't see that as compatible. Data inbox still works for that.
Okay. So the question, so a couple questions that just came in. How can you manage application data in the Fix-It tool? They were asking if they missed that. That's still on the roadmap, right? To be
Yes.
implemented. Okay.
Yep, that's on the roadmap.
This one that just came in a couple minutes ago. They planted the soybean field with some population trials. They harvested it on an angle. Is the field region report going to accurately show the yield by population, or will they be skewed due to harvesting on an angle?
Great question. So whenever we do trials with soybeans, harvesting with the rows is going to give you the most accurate reading. When you harvest at the angle, obviously your flow, you're going to get part of one variety and part of the other. So when you're looking at your harvest data, actually, I'll just talk through this. You can narrow up your field region reports to go to basically buffer out. Like you saw the example that I used for the fungicide, and I went away from the non-sprayed area to avoid drift. You can take that same concept with your soybean at an angle. Depending on how steep your angle is, you can narrow in your field region reports basically to buffer out any data that may be mixed with multiple varieties to get a more accurate reading. And I'm looking at the question. Yeah, accurately show the yields by population. So yeah, it just depends. Yeah, that one just depends, but that's kind of what I think I answered that question.
Okay. Sorry, Ben, you just moved off of your compatibility page, but the rate controller on their Trimble 1000 is a cap stand for spraying and a Field IQ for fertilizer.
Okay. Trimble Field IQ, I imagine. What I'm guessing is the more popular Trimble GPS that'd be used with that. I'm not seeing that as compatible with the Field IQ. Capstan, I don't see Capstan as an option at all. So unfortunately, in that case, we are not compatible.
Okay, perfect. But they could still use data inbox, right?
Sure can. Yep.
Okay. All right. How can I move harvest data from the wrong field to the correct field? I have several fields that are next to each other, and the combine will switch fields if I get close to the field boundary.
Great question. So I did not highlight that when I was looking at the Fix-It tool, but there was another button besides edit and delete that was reprocess. So we get this quite often where, it didn't switch the fields or you accidentally selected the wrong field. What you can do is in that Fix-It tool, go to your harvest data and select the field that has the data, all the wrong data. Yeah, Ben's going to pull that out really quick.
Yep.
But if you click on reprocess, So if you select a field that has the data, the correct data for that field, and then maybe some passes that are outside the boundary, select that field first. If you click on this reprocess spatially, it'll then kick that data back into data inbox and allow you to do the correct field assignment within data inbox, almost as if you're bringing in the data manually.
Yeah, I don't have a good example of a field that's good, but you can see the reprocess spatially. So I selected a field that does have too much data in it, has a portion of another field in it, and then I would click reprocess spatially, and it'll drop it into the, as Jacob mentioned, drop it into the data inbox, where I could then choose the correct field to import it into. It's very slick. It feels a little scary, but it's very slick.
And we can help assist you in that, either the support team or the activation specialist. When it comes into data inbox, over on the far right, there's a drop down for every file that comes in that's called field assignment. And you can select, the biggest thing is just to make sure that, you do see 2 different fields in that field assignment for that field in question.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep.
This one, we'll do 2 more questions. One is going to be a little bit of a unique question related to engine torque, and the other is going to be related to starter fertilizer again. So first off, this gentleman is wanting to know if there is a way that they can map engine torque along with their tillage maps, like as a separate map, but if we are able to collect that data. They're wanting to do this. Their goal, just to give a little bit here, is to see soil tilth and yield, possibly leading to prescription tillage in the future. So a pretty unique and forward-thinking use that maybe you guys can give some light on.
Yeah, so we can't look at engine torque, but we can look at speed as a data layer. So that might get them close to what they're looking for. But currently, we don't have a map layer that can look at engine torque.
Yeah, and I think that there may be some folks out there that might be like hacking that a little bit to pull in that data to view it in the CAB app metrics, but I don't think we're mapping it. But I'll take that back to the teams.
Yeah, okay. I'm not aware. Yeah, go ahead, Mindy.
The next one is when we were showing the planting tab, I don't remember if it was Ben or Jake, that we had an additional starter fertilizer tab, and that this individual does not have that when looking at their planting data. What might cause that not to show up? Do they need to update their software? Do they need to call into support? What kind of troubleshooting steps can we guide them in?
Well, yeah, so the first thing I would say is always ensure that you're on the most up-to-date version of the CAB app. That's just a standard across the board. And if you can't get to the most up-to-date version of the iPad or of the CAB app, ensure that your iPad has the ability to update software. We do have a list of iPads that are being rolled out because they don't support iOS updates anymore. But from a starter fertilizer standpoint, you're going to see that with CAB and potentially information that you data inbox. Without knowing more details, I'm guessing that user is probably a 2020 user, or they're importing that data, and that map layer is not being generated from the source that it's coming from.
Okay, I do see that the individual that asked that question is still on the line. So,
I believe starter fertilizer is one of those map layers from 2020 that they are mapping there. But currently, that's a translation from precision planning to us that we can't bring that map layer in. I believe it's starter fertilizer.
All right, one last question. This one relates to the torque. They also are interested in fuel use per acre. Would be a great add.
Yeah, those are two great things. I know that in some of the work with our drive team, we have looked at the future of that and bringing in more analytics from fuel and engine information. Because as we're connected to that piece of machinery, we can, if the machine is generating it, the concept is that we can grab it. The biggest thing that our engineers and our product team is working on is how do we translate that into a map layer or a way that you can view it. Currently, we don't have that, but I do know that those are common questions that come up that we're continuing to look into.
All right, and their response is speed is a reasonable start, and the grower doesn't think that they can see speed, but they will dig in. And the individual with the starter fertilizer says, yes, they are a 2020 user, and they are on version 10.0.3 for CADA. So they are up to date. So that is great. Folks, we still have several of you on the phone. Thank you very much for hanging in with us as we answer all these questions. We hope that you find this valuable. Again, the recording will be available later this week on the Climate YouTube channel. So go to YouTube, search the Climate Corporation, and if you are, excited about reruns, we'll have probably different questions because different folks will sign on and join us again at 7 a.m. on Thursday morning, our last webinar before the holidays really kick into high gear. We hope that you have a great holiday season. Please stay safe and happy data analyzing. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, guys.